So, welcome. This is episode 3 of Another One for the Books. We have read
Another one.
another one. We've done some reading. We read chapters 4, 5, and 6 of Elantris.
Mhm.
It was, not too much happened, I don't think. It was more lore dumping, that kind of stuff. I was doing a bit of a calculation on how long it's going to take us to finish this book at the pace that we're going,
Oh
and we might
no.
want to pick it up.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're gonna
Yeah.
be here forever. If you want us to go through all of Sanderson's work, I don't know if we'll make it before we die.
Yeah, I know. So my calculation for this book is that it's going to be like 5.25 months before we finish this book if we do 3
Oh
chapters a week.
no! I don't think our audience can last that long either.
Yeah, we
They're
might
like,
want
pick
to
up the
pick up.
pace.
Yeah, we might want to pick up the pace. So maybe next week we will do 5 chapters. Maybe that might be a good thing to do. We'll see. We'll talk offline and try to figure that out. But
Yeah.
for today, we've got 3 chapters. Like I was saying, there's not too much happening. Lots of lore dumping, some interesting interactions with characters, but more just world building, all that kind of stuff. Do you have any initial thoughts before we dive in?
Just seeing. I don't know. So far, it's like continual build up
Hmm.
of what's happening next.
Yeah.
Hrathen's little chapter is interesting, where he gets to make a scapegoat. We'll get to
Yeah.
that a bit later.
I thought that was cool.
Sarene is pretty neat too, because it goes into more of her, we see more of her, like, I wouldn't say mischievous nature, but her inquisitive and Sherlock Holmes
Yeah.
abilities to
Yeah.
feint a bit, and like not fainting, but like masking her true nature, like feint,
Yes.
FEINT. Yeah.
Yeah.
And seeing her extended family,
Yeah, we get her backstory
we do
a
get a bit
little
of
bit.
backstory, but it was still pretty nice. It's like
Yeah.
a little wholesome chapter. And
Yeah, I
then
thought so.
Raoden was like very interesting to me. I think his chapter was very cool. We
Yeah,
get a
we
little
learned
tease at the end of like, ooh, magic's not gone. It's still
that was huge.
here.
That was huge.
Yeah.
And also learning about the sort of inner workings of the city was
The
also really cool.
gangs.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
gangs.
I thought it was just be like unruly rabbles, like animals, literally. But no, it turns out there's some sane people there.
There's some organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. All right. So yeah, there was some good stuff in there. So why don't we get into it?
Okay.
Chapter 4. So again, it follows the same structure as the first 3 chapters.
Mm.
Each chapter is a different character, and they're in the same order. So this chapter is Raoden, next chapter is Sarene, and the final chapter is Hrathen. So this chapter opens up with Raoden and Galadon. They're watching a new arrival. This woman is kind of like, from the vibe I got, is that she's like doesn't have a lot of strength, and she's just kind of standing where they left her in the gates.
Mm.
And she turns left, and this is when Galadon said that she made a smart choice. And I think someone comes and takes her basket, right, from her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at this point, Raoden wants to like interject, but Galadon grabs his shoulder and he's like, "You shouldn't do that. Remember the eternal pain thing? Like, let's just step it back a notch." But we do sort of get a bit of insight into, like, he's the heroic kind of character, that sort of archetype a bit. He's
We'll jump
obviously way
in
more
when.
complex than that, and we get a little bit of insight into that later, but that is
Mhm.
initially like sort of the vibe that we get.
Yeah.
So this is when we get a little bit of insight into the opposing factions. Apparently, when you enter the gates, if you take a step right, that is the gang that belongs to a person called Sheor. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Let's
I don't know if I'm.
consult the pronunciation
Yeah,
book
let me just quickly
or
Google it.
quote. We should absolutely pin this page to whatever the heck we're using. Ha! Yeah, it's here. There we go. You put it in the Discord chat.
Oh, the
Our Discord
pronunciation
chat.
guide. Yeah, I just want to, like, that one doesn't have specific character names. It's more like vowel sounds.
I
So you
mean, we
gotta.
can gather from those
Okay, if you can
vowels.
work out how to say that name.
Oh boy. Gotta find the words, the letters for it.
It is
Hang on.
I got it here. It is Shaor. Shaor.
SHAO.
I think it's
AOR.
Shaor, looking at the way the vowels are pronounced.
Yeah, because the A
Yeah.
and O together goes like AO kind of bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sheor. No, we'll go with Sheor. If you step forward, that's Andin.
Mm,
That's two A's. So again, I don't know if that's being pronounced correctly. And if you step to the left, it's Karada. So Karada's men are the ones that Raoden ran into, the ones
mm.
who chased him down. So we get we kind of like maybe they're the more brutal gang. We do obviously get to find out what the personalities of the gang members are later, but that's just sort of something that we could try to piece together. Um, so that's we dive more into that later. Right now, they just have a sort of a short conversation about like the quote. I'm calling them dregs. I think that's what they were called in but Dark Souls, the people who just sort of essentially lose their mind. They
Mm.
go insane from all of the pain, and they just become husks of themselves. And this is what Galadon calls dying in this sense. Like he says, people don't last forever in this place.
Well, he
And
goes on to mention like everything in Elantris is decaying and dying way too quickly.
that is a very big tell. Yeah. Even
Yeah.
the stones in the buildings are breaking down more
Mm.
quickly, which
I
is
think he points that out to Raoden. Oh gosh darn it, what's his name?
Raoden.
Raoden. Why do I want to say Radion? Oh my goodness. So
he
he
point
tells Raoden, he points it out, or Raoden actually questions like, why is everything so like decrepit and dilapidated? Like this happened 10 years ago, but this like feels like it's been centuries or like way long. Like I think he said
Mhm.
centuries or decades. And
Yeah.
Galadon's like, well, it's just the curse or the whatever
The
magical
Sheod.
affliction, the Sheod exactly, is
Yeah.
causing it to be. Did you say decay? Were you the one that mentioned decay?
Yeah, decay. So
Yeah.
it's almost like the city like is a living thing,
Mm,
and it's also affected by the Sheod in the same way. So it's starting to decay faster
mm.
than the city would have when it was had the power of whatever deity it had. If that's so, again, in later chapters, we there's a question as to whether or not the Elantrans were godlike people or if they were charlatans. But a little bit of spoiler, we'll get in there. I mean, if you're listening to this,
Ooh.
you read it too, so you know. Anyways,
Probably judging us, but like, these fools. What did
yeah,
they win?
they can't
Yeah,
pronounce
chapter
these
10.
names.
uh,
So yeah,
we are worms. We are learning.
yeah. So yeah, the talk about the dregs leads sort of to a natural question from Raoden, where he asks Galadon, how long have you been here? And we learn that he's only been there a few months,
Few months,
which is
yeah.
kind of shocking with how well he knows the city.
That's what I was gonna get into. Was like, is Galadon like okay? Maybe this is a testament to his character because later in the chapter,
Mm,
we get a little taste of what he's been kind of up to, and we're
yeah.
not sure that he just stumbled upon this place or not, or
Hmm.
he's been cultivating it before, and like brings in that knowledge from the outside in.
Yeah.
So I feel like he might have been like a scholar studying Elantris beforehand,
Hmm.
and was like, okay, here's where to avoid. Like I'm gonna stick to the shadows. Like here's what I know about the affliction. Here's what
Yeah.
I'm going to prioritize, like my own survival, but also like be secret and hide like everywhere. But then he knows everything there to the point
Exactly.
where where I'm convinced he's been there before.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a really good point. He could have been there before, or he studied it somehow,
Hmm.
or maybe my read of it was that he has a lot of street smarts. Maybe he's also a scholar, like that's kind of what the books sort of lead us into, but he doesn't
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
talk about the books at his place. And he does sort of when
Mm,
Raoden asks him how he found the place, he sort of veers off a bit by saying, "Oh, I just stumbled upon it."
yeah, he
I
kind of
feel
like
like there's
shrugs it
more
off.
there too. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to this character, and I feel like there's something is going to happen in this book where this character is going to take a turn. But we will see. So, anyways,
Mm,
they continue on their conversation. Galadon starts asking, like, Raoden, why are you not scared of the stuff that's happening around here? And Raoden admits that he is scared, but he's just doing really well to ignore it. If he gave
mm.
into it, he would just be cowering under a piece of wood. So after this,
Submit to his will. That's
yeah,
another example of
exactly.
his like strong
Yes.
character.
Yeah, for sure. We also kind of get a little bit of teasing of that when he starts reflecting on his friends. But we'll dive onto that later. So they start talking about how Elantris is broken up into three
Yeah.
sections,
Hmm.
and that there are different gang leaders for each section.
Mm.
So there's the market section, which is Sheor. They're again the men that Raoden met, or Raoden met Sheor's men. So we get the vibe that they're a little bit more brutal.
Yeah.
In the palace section is the where Karada is. Um, and that's the one that took the food from the woman that day. We also
Mm.
actually find out later that the person who takes the food from the woman, if the person steps forward or to the left, I think, and their basket gets taken, Karada, the leader of the gang, is the one that takes the food from them. So she doesn't let one of her men or followers do it for her. She does it herself. Just a little bit of insight into that character. And then the
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
last
whoa. Wait, what? No, no, no. She doesn't go out and does it herself. They
I'm
bring the food to her.
I'm pretty sure I've got notes on it. We'll get there, but I'm pretty
Okay.
sure that's something that Galadon said, that she is the one who gets it herself. I could be wrong. Caveat with all of this stuff.
Okay.
I'm just reading it just the same way you are. But
We're not
when I
reading
get
it
to
differently.
when I get to my
Buddy.
notes, we'll see. So yeah, and then the last section, the university section, is where Andon, I don't know how you say the name, is.
Aiden?
Yeah. So Galadon or Raoden asked some questions about this, and we learned that Aiden, I'm just going to call him Aiden. Oh my God, this name's going
You're
to bother me.
stick with Aiden. You know what? Listeners listening to the last podcast, I
Andin.
got fed up with naming these.
I'm going to call him Andin. Okay.
But now you're just making up stuff. What
No,
would
that works. Aand and Andin. I
Mhm.
think that works. So he was there initially because the scrolls are made of sheepskin, so
Yes.
they could eat them. And they've since run out of scrolls, and now they are trying to boil books, but that
Which
doesn't
is
have.
insane
Yeah, that's
because,
crazy.
well, not like because eating the cellulose of the book doesn't help you as a human, but also like they're destroying all this knowledge in the
Exactly.
library,
Yep.
which I think Raiden is like absolutely gets dumbfounded by that notion.
Yeah,
Uh,
we learn that he's like a bookworm. Like he's big
yeah.
into gaining knowledge and learning a lot, which is cool.
Hmm. And then Galadon was like, "Well, they got to eat something," and to
Hmm.
them, eating and surviving is more important than just reading
Yes, exactly.
in
Yeah,
the
surviving is
library.
more important. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we do also that the conversation kind of takes a almost natural turn to, well, why don't we eat each other? And we also find out that apparently the people who have been affected by the Sheod taste so bitter that no one can really stand to eat it. So
Mm,
cannibalism is kind of out of the window, or
yeah.
out the window at that point.
To me, it feels like the Sheod has turned people afflicted with it into like mindless, not mindless zombies, but into zombies. Where literally it's just like you've decayed. Like in the last chapter or the previous chapter related, where literally his heart wasn't beating anymore, and he
Yeah,
was
they're dead.
shocked to find out. Where
Yeah.
Galon pointed out to him, is like, "Hey, you're dead, my guy."
hmm
Um,
Yeah, they're zombies, but they
mm,
retain all of their faculties,
they're
especially
yeah,
the sensation for pain.
exactly.
Yeah.
So they're still conscientious of their surroundings,
hmm
sentient, I guess, but
hmm
then their senses get overridden or overloaded so much that they go insane.
hmm
So,
Yep. So this little section ends with Raoden sort of asking about why things are the way they are,
mm,
and he says they don't have to be that way. So again, sort of
mm,
leading us to that this character is going to take us through some sort of transformation of the city, I imagine, or at least personal transformation, which is what always happens in the hero's journey, anyways.
a surprise face reveal.
Yep. So the next section is where we start talking about the decay of Elantris. Like you
Mm,
mentioned earlier, how it looks way more decayed than it should be in 10 years. Even the stones themselves are crumbling, which should not be happening that quickly.
mm, yeah.
Galadon is walking through the city, and we note how carefully he walks. So I think the quote there is that the more careful they are, the longer they stay sane. Like you're trying to avoid getting stubbing your toe, or like what happened to Raoden, or getting a splinter, those kind of things.
But
We
it's
learn.
added. Oh,
Go ahead. No, go
uh,
ahead.
which to me like makes sense. But then the speed at which you have to like ensure they don't stumble into something, you're like carefully planning your step.
hmm
Fine, but then again, back to the Galadon knowing more than he's leading on, like he knows where the paths are to get to specific locations. He's
That's
not like
true.
stumbling through streets here,
Yep.
because the chances of you going into a random street and then encountering a mindless drag, or a drag, I guess, because I guess that's uh, synonymous with mindless at this point. Never mind.
Right.
Um, you know, it's crazy that he would know where to go specifically and how to get there, right? And for him to be there for like months at a time, either he has like spent all his time like in survival mode, like street smarts, and like knowing and mapping out like really good like photogenic memory, or he's been here before, which
Mm-hmm.
could make sense. Like 10 years isn't
Mm-hmm.
a long time, right? Maybe he was here. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Maybe
That's
he
the
was
thing.
someone who was like serving the Elantrians, which is
As
also
a
something we learn about later.
slave. Yeah,
Yeah.
chapter 2 or chapter damn it 5. The next
Y-
chapter.
yes. Anyways,
Mm,
so yes, Galadon walks very carefully. We do learn what the dregs are called. It's Hoed, I think, is how you
mm,
pronounce Hoed. These are people who have just succumbed to the pain. And this is when Raoden is starting to reflect on his friends outside. So there are two friends, Kian, Kiin, who we
mm,
meet later, and Royal, Roial. Again, pronunciation could be wrong.
mm.
They have a group that they need to keep together. So this is interesting. What this group is doing, we don't know. Also, he mentions Lucal, who we also meet later,
Yeah.
which is his best friend, who's now newly married. The one with his two friends, because Kian is Sarene's uncle.
Cool. Yeah.
So it's interesting that they're friends. I don't know if they're like friends or if they're just
Mm,
members of a group because the age difference.
it's
Lucal
pretty
makes
big.
more sense because they're
Mm,
closer in age. That's why that's why it makes more sense as his best friend.
yep.
But yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm very interested to see where this goes. Also, in terms, just in sort of reference to other fantasy books, I do like how the scope of this story is a little bit smaller. Like all of these characters are not off on different edges of the continents that will eventually come together like 3/4 of the way through the book.
Hmm.
They're running into each other and they're mentioning each other quickly, and they're all centered around Elantris. So
Yeah.
I like that a lot about this so far.
So far, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I want to say that Sarene is going to be the one that meets Hrathen or Raoden first. I
Oh,
want to say. Like,
absolutely. I mean, they've already
I
Serene.
mean,
They
I mean,
have a bit of an
Sarene and Hrathen
encounter. Yeah.
a little bit, like an acknowledgement or so.
Hmm.
But like it'll, I feel like it'll be Serene's investigation will end up leading to both of them, whereas Raiden and Hrathen are like minding their own business, and then Serene's like in the. Well, I don't think Raiden would notice Serene at all. I mean, again, they were betrothed
They also
before.
spoke via that Seod thing, Sion, whatever they're
Seance.
called. So he might recognize her if he saw her.
Maybe, but
The
it's definitely
features aren't there, right?
Serene. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
definitely Serene going out and like she's gonna stumble upon them again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so yeah, Serene definitely is the if she sounds she feels like the go-getter, the troublemaker, right? The one who's not going to
yeah.
be satisfied with how things are.
The
I
curious one.
also get that vibe from Raoden, again, how he ended the last section, saying, things don't have to be this way. But
Mhm.
he's more in a place where he's trying to learn as much as he can about his new situation before he takes action. Whereas Serene is also learning as much as she can, but she's moving more quickly. Same
Mhm.
with Rothan, actually, but Rothan already has a lot of knowledge, so there's not
Rothan
really.
has a plan in mind.
Yeah, and he's
He's
already
gonna enact it.
convinced about how he's going to
Yeah.
take care of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we learn a little bit more about the Raod, the Derethi priests, which is the priesthood from the Empire, which
Mhm.
we also get a lot more sort of information into the structure of the religion later on. They think it was a punishment by God because essentially the Elantrans were living as gods, so God saw fit to punish them for their
Mhm.
hubris. The Elantrans also allowed any other religions to come into the city, but no one ever really converted because why would they convert to a religion where they can't see the god when they have gods right in front of them? So interesting. There's also one of the references here to the religion called Shu Kesig. We learn later that that's sort of the overarching one, and there are different sects below it.
Mm.
But we'll get to that in Serene and Rothan's chapters. And also, we learned that the Raod came as a storm and an earthquake, and that a large chasm opened up and like rended the world. I don't know. I don't know what you would call it, but there
Biblical
was
proportions
yes, there
of
was
calamity
exactly there was
and a
there was a lot. Yeah.
not chasm.
Well,
Oh my
is there
god.
tomato?
Duh. Wow, you threw
Anyways,
the tomato back in my face.
so Raoden and Galadon continue their sort of
Yeah.
perusing the city, and they're on top of some buildings.
Mhm.
They're at one looking over the market. I guess they don't want to actually go into the market because that's where some of the men from one of the factions are. And while Raoden's up there, he notes that a lot of the roofs are flat. Apparently, they had a lot of rooftop gardens. So he tries to picture what Elantris might have looked like back then. Yeah, they don't want to get any closer because Sheor, that's the guy, his men will be there. That's again where Raoden was at the beginning in the first chapter, right? Yeah, in the first chapter when he got sent to Elantris.
Mhm.
Um, Sheor is the kind of person that likes to control people. This is when we get a little bit of sort of exposition Galadin is telling us about him.
Mm.
Um, his gang is a bit morally corrupt, and
It's a bit more of a free for all a little bit, and it's just kind of
yeah,
like held together by this larger threat, I guess.
yes,
Um,
yeah, exactly. There's a
yeah.
larger threat of like a fight that could break out, and usually
Mm.
that's enough to stop a fight from happening. So I wasn't entirely sure when I was reading this part, but it sounds like even though someone will take the basket of food, that the gang still split it equally.
Yes,
There was a
that's
mentioning about that, right?
yeah. I think that's more specific because it's weird because in a way like because we're introduced to these dregs as like mindless, like reactionary, but then
Hmm.
somehow they have cooperation and they fear another drag more than themselves. So either
Right.
that again, maybe Galadon is the teaser for this. Maybe those other dregs or other Elantrians affected with the Shayad have magical powers, right? And
Right.
maybe those magical powers, like if they learn a spell, can like ease pain, right?
Oh, like a healing.
Or like a healing ability. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be my hunch is like
Hmm.
they want to bring this food so that they get rewarded with, you know, some I don't know, like I said, mentioned
Some
like
reprieve.
some exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
some relaxation, some a breakaway from what they have right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. That's
So
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. So
so
go ahead.
though that's my
Oh,
hunch. I have not read
okay.
past chapter 6.
Okay,
So
fair
yeah,
enough. Yeah, so I wasn't completely clear on that about how the split happens. They do mention something about a third, so I think the gangs kind of split it, and the
mm,
reason is because there is a threat of a fight. If they don't, and usually the threat alone is enough to stop people from fighting, because in Elantris, because of the fact that they can't stop, the feeling of pain,
mm.
they're a lot more cognizant of death and pain. So there's a
Of
lot
getting it
more at
themselves.
risk,
Yeah.
exactly, when it comes to a fight. So they continue on. They move to another roof. Luckily for us, in terms of chapter length, the university and the palace are border each other. So we
Yep.
don't have to have another section where they talk about these two other gang leaders separately. So Karada and Anden, man, I keep stumbling over that name.
Aiden.
They have an uneasy truce because of the bordering of the university and the palace. We also get sort of a little funny thing where Galadon doesn't trust stairs. At first, I was like, "Is this like a weird, like religious thing? Maybe like he doesn't like stairs for some reason." But
He's
obviously,
afraid of like tumbling downstairs.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason why I said that though is because, and this isn't much of a spoiler of anything, but in another Sanderson book, there is a group of people, and in their religion, it is blasphemous to walk on stones or to use stones in buildings.
Ah,
And while he's walking through the building, he's remarking all of the blasphemy that's happening around him. So that's why I made that little stairs connection. But yeah,
okay.
it's just because everything's falling apart and it makes sense.
I
Yeah.
would imagine. I wonder. Hmm. I wonder if like Elantris is becoming more like a shifting maze where things are falling apart and like access ways are, filled with debris now, and someone else go a different route, right? So
Yeah, that's a very
like,
good point. And in the terms of that hero's journey, all of these characters are obviously going to go through some sort of transformation. And
mm,
Elantris is a character in this book. So maybe there's a transformation that's going to occur in the city, and that's kind of what's happening. And that's kind of what the Raod is. It might
mm,
just be a natural cycle. Like this is what happens, and eventually the people afflicted by it will have some new form that they occupy once this is all over.
mm,
It's a good point, though. So this is where Galadon starts explaining Karada. And as
mm.
he's talking, he's like looking around a lot, and Raoden's kind of like he can see things that Galadon can see things that Raoden can't. So when I was reading this at first, I was thinking, oh, is he like starting to go? Like, is he starting to disassociate from
Getting
reality
senile.
because he's been there for a few months now and things, the pain, the hunger, it's all
Mm,
starting to get to him.
that
But
wasn't my take.
it could also be because later we learn about the magic.
Mm.
It could also be that he can see something else because his abilities give him insight to see things that aren't visible to normal people.
My take is more instinctual because he's been there for a while. That he like
Hmm.
knows, like he's like being careful and like watching
Yeah.
and make sure like no one's like coming out the corner and like spots them. Because then that
Right.
reflects to Raiden, who's like very new to the city, who like
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
know where to look for or what to look for exactly.
That makes
So
sense. That's
so
a really good read. Yeah. It's kind of like almost like a ranger in the woods, right?
a little bit like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
He knows what
Galadon's
he's looking
eyes
for.
might be more acute, maybe his hearing is more acute, listening to the
Hmm.
specific things that are happening around him,
Hmm.
whereas Raiden isn't attuned to that yet.
Yeah. Yeah. So we learn more about Karada's gang. She doesn't let new members in easily.
Mm.
And this is where I do have my note that she is the one who takes the food personally from the new arrivals. If you don't believe me, maybe check it. But
No, but
that's
it
what I got.
says, well, like it says that, oh, she takes it personally for them, but like I don't think she runs out, grabs it, and comes back and eats it. That doesn't make sense.
No, she would
Like
probably split it up.
that's the thing, yeah. But I don't think she's the one that runs out. I think it's brought back to her, and then she gets like a portion of it and divvies out the rest. Again,
Yep.
back to my theory of like maybe some of these leaders have magical abilities that would seek favors from their disciples. Maybe I guess at this point,
Could be.
followers maybe. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's my interpretation. So I'm
Yeah.
sure it'll
So
like, ooh, you know what I think? Hot take. Maybe she's Rodian's mom. Oh,
Raoden.
Ray. Ah, Radiant's mom. Oh,
Possibly. Maybe that it
only
could explain why she might want to kill the king. So we do learn that she
yes,
Yeah, we do
exactly.
learn that she has escaped Elantris 3 times. She doesn't like being there. The
Mm,
next time they find her um, escape outside of the walls of Elantris, they will kill her, I think. And every time they catch her, she is near the king's palace and she wants to kill him for some reason. Again, Raoden does not know why. Yeah, so that'd be interesting if there was some sort of familial cult connection there. So since we're looking on at both the university and the palace,
mm,
Galadon then starts explaining Andon. So apparently he was a baron of some kind or some sort of other noble. He thinks he is. I get the vibe that he's like a big boisterous guy trying to take power for almost power's sake.
yeah. Or his
He
entitlement to power, not
Yes,
because yeah.
and he also so later on in Rothen's chapter we learn his sort of part of his plan, the first rule of his plan to dismantle the society. And we also, in this chapter, then learn that Andon, his plan is to attack Kae, the city that surrounds Elantris, or is one of the bordering cities of Elantris. But G thinks this is just something that he says. So it might be something that he's using to unite his followers, right? Just it's like a call to action. It's
Yeah.
something like, we're going to
A
do this
greater
and we're going to
purpose.
break out. And yeah, a purpose for
Yeah.
them to be together. So yeah, he talks big. He talks that he's going to feed his people, but he can't really deliver. I mean, he could when he had the sheepskin scrolls, but
Hmm.
now he can't. He also is pretty brutal and dispenses judgment very quickly. And he's also extremely jealous of Karada because she has the palace and he wants to be the ruler of Elantris even now. So he thinks he should be the one to have the palace.
Hmm.
So Raoden reflects a bit on Andon's story, and he doesn't recognize the name Andon. So if he was a baron, he would have known him. So either he's lying or he changed his name when he came to Elantris. So after we explain all of these gang leaders, Raoden does notice a well in the middle of the city, and we learn that that's the
Connected to the
only well.
river.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
connected to the river that runs underneath the city, which also the city itself has underground plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing before, well, one of the last things before this end of this section is we see a lost Seon, which is really sad. We learn that when um, a Seon's master or the person that they're assigned to, I can't remember what the exact actual relationship is, when they are affected by the Sheod, the Seon goes mad, and it just
Mm.
sort of wanders the city of Elantris, which is just, it's pretty heartbreaking when you think about it, because they're like, I know they're sentient beings and they're smart, but they're kind of like pets because they're just like little glowing balls of light. They're super cute. But anyways, yeah, I thought that was kind of sad. And this is when we learn that also, because Raoden is reflecting some more, he has a
Mm.
Seon called Ian, or it's Ien. I'm going to call it Ian.
Mm.
So he's wondering what's happening with that. Galadon then notices that it's going to rain. Again, Raoden doesn't believe him, so that kind of adds credence to your theory that he just knows more about the world than Raoden. He's not a sheltered prince. He's just like, yeah, it's going to rain. And he's like, where
Back
do
to
you want to
Ollie for
go?
the weather.
Yeah.
Gonna
Where can
rain.
we go? He's like, oh, just pick a house. And then eventually he convinces Raoden eventually convinces Galadon to
Mm.
take him to his house. They get
Well,
to his house. Sorry,
what
go ahead.
Raiden does is like, oh, why mean a random house? Like, surely you, since you know so much about the place, you have a specific hideout in mind.
Yeah,
Let's
you
go
lived here.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I don't know how he like convinces him. It's just more like I forgot.
It's
I
very
didn't write the notes
quick.
for
It's
that.
a very
Yeah,
quick exchange.
he's
But
like,
yeah, he
okay,
does. Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, we're at Galadon's house and it's filled with books, and Raoden's very
yeah.
happy about that. He's obviously a bookworm. He likes to learn.
Mm.
Probably a lot about like political stuff, things like that. Who knows, magic, anything. And this is when we learned a little bit about the magic system finally. It is tied to letters, which are called aeons, and that make up the Aeonic language, which is the language that the Derethi priests from the Fjordell Empire speak. When Hrathen gets to Kae and he meets Fionn, that
Mm.
other Derethi priest, he tells him, speak in Aeonic, man. And then they change and start speaking in that language. So that's really interesting. And at the end of the chapter, Galadon draws one of the letters. I think it's called Dei, Dei,
Yep,
and it leaves a little light path.
in the
And
air, right in front of him.
yep. And before Raoden can say anything, the chapter ends, but we just see Galadon kind of smiling behind the glowing
He's doing a
rune in the air.
little wink,
Yeah,
nudge to the
little
camera.
wink and a
Like you
nod.
didn't expect that, did you?
Yeah,
Uh
surprised you.
huh. Got you good.
Yep.
So that brings up a great discussion.
Okay.
Is the Shayad actually cursed?
If they
Or
can still do magic, yeah.
yeah, so like back to our previous episode of like, well, is it just like a weird botched up version of it that someone tried to mess around
A
with?
corrupted version.
Or yeah, or what was the other theory we were circulating? I think that's the most prominent one. Like someone
That's the
tried
one
to
that I
get
remember
too
for sure.
greedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it
And
was
so
corrupted. The power was corrupted in some way.
yeah, but doesn't mean like it was fully changed. So maybe
Right.
that some of the Shayad's abilities still remain,
Mm-hmm.
just maybe need to be taught or relearned, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like again Galadon leads on to more than he should possibly show here. So again,
Yeah.
I like the theory that he's like a scholar previously, like he's been to Elantris before. That would make more sense.
That would, yeah.
Or
And
he's lying. Or he's lying. He's like, actually, I've been here the whole time.
there's a lot of ways that this could go. I'm
Yeah.
actually really interested in this character and to see where he ends up.
Mhm.
So the next chapter is Sarene's chapter. It's following the same pattern from the last episode. So Sarene is in the throne room, and this is
Mhm.
when Hrathen enters to talk to the king.
The big
Uh,
crimson, not big crimson, but his shiny, not really
Blood
armor.
red,
But yeah.
exactly. Yes, not really armor. They remark about how the armor is mostly ceremonial. It
Hmm.
obviously draws the eye. It has that purpose, but it would be useless in battle.
Mm.
She also remarks that he is a full Gjorn, which is very rare. Apparently, across the entire empire, there are only 20 of them.
Yeah, only a
This
handful.
Yep. And Hrathen begins his audience with the king, and he's trying to convince him to essentially convert. So
Mm.
we get a big lore dump on the religions here. So Shu Korath is what the king believes, which is a sect of the religion. Shu Dareth is another sect, which is considered the true way by Hrathen. That is what the empire follows. So that's where we get Karathi and Darethi from.
Mhm.
And Shu Keseg is the overarching religion.
Pantheon, I guess.
Yes, and
Yeah.
the Karathi and Darethi religions are sects within that, but it all falls under Keseg.
Mhm.
So that, I thought that was interesting. It was good to finally get a little bit of insight into that. But the king just doesn't care. He's like, no, I'm not going to convert. He also thinks that the empire is not powerful. Apparently, they haven't been a threat for the last 300 years.
Which
This
is
is
kind of weird because, like, if again the Fjordan Empire has been like taking over kingdoms in its surrounding area and growing, like, shouldn't the king be aware of this? Like, it seems kind of foolish unless he
so
believes that they need Arelon for like as an ally or something like. Maybe
right.
that's what he believes, but he's like, I don't know. I feel like he just like he waves it away too dismissively in this meeting, especially with such a like the highest priest level. You think he'd be like actually have a bit more of a discussion with him, except he's just like, oh yeah, get out of here, priest. Don't care.
I don't think he recognizes the level of that priest. I think he just thinks he's another Darethi priest. But
Ugh,
also his reasoning. I mean, there's a few reasons. Ash does say that King Iadon is a
a merchant.
merchant and not a
Yeah.
politician, so that is one way that he would not be able to recognize that. But also, we do learn that the Empire has not conquered a country in over 300 years. Um, so they haven't done any conquering. And what Iadon is looking for when it comes to strength is military prowess, which he hasn't seen. However, Sarene knows something more, and she knows that the Werns, the leader, the whatever, I can't remember his first name now, but his last name is Wern.
He does, I
Uh,
don't think he mentions his first name. It's just Emperor or Warren. I
it
think those are the
might be,
only
yeah.
two nomenclatures we
I feel
have
like
for.
I feel like there was, but
Mm,
you could, yeah, you could be right.
they address him as the Emperor or he or she. I don't know. They
Yeah, we don't know yet, or
or
Wern.
Warren.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, so she knows that the Emperor is more powerful, but the
Hmm.
King doesn't know that. We don't know how Sarene knows that. Anyways,
Well, oh, maybe it's like later on, but I feel like Sarene does recall. Maybe I'd recall Sarene having a discussion with her father, but she seems to be aware of the larger like pirate marauder fleets that are under the control of the Empire.
oh,
Uh,
interesting. Okay.
and so, because I feel like Teod has to deal with a lot of
Chaos
naval
is the maritime, like they
defenses.
have an
Yeah,
armada. Yeah.
exactly. So they're very much worried to the fact that Fjorden has control or a lot of control over some naval vessels, i.e., the larger. I mean, I guess they're privateers now since they get like essentially hired by the Empire of Fjorden. But but it's also concerning that Ideon doesn't or isn't willing to accept that there's a threat at his doorstep, like literally, like across the mountains. Or
Yeah, he
maybe
just
the
writes it
mountains will
off.
get. Yeah, he just writes it off. He's like, man,
Yeah.
whatever.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
I agree that it's crazy. So
makes
obviously
him a
Hrathen,
flawed character. Ooh.
I mean, he's been flawed from the beginning. He's a
Yeah, that's
chauvinist.
true.
He's
Yeah.
kind of a dink.
What? He has some redeeming qualities, like
Mm,
oh, never mind. I
yeah, he
forgot.
doesn't have any, I
He
don't
doesn't have
think.
any.
Every time we've encountered him, he's been an ass.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So Hrathen realizes this isn't going anywhere and just gives a
Mhm.
curt nod, turns and leaves. As he's
Mm.
leaving, this is when Sarene and Hrathen meet eyes for the first time. And Hrathen is a little bit confused. Like looking at her, he's just like, who is this? What is she doing here? But he doesn't actually
Yeah.
say anything.
Hmm.
So Sarene does believe that Hrathen is fairly dangerous, even if the king doesn't. She recognizes again that he's a high Gjorn priest, whatever it's called.
Hmm.
We get again the insight that the king is a merchant, not a politician, all that stuff. The Werns are more powerful. This is where it all happens. And this is also when Sarene decides that she's going to help the king, because partially because she wants to quote unquote match wits with a high Gjorn, whatever that means. But yeah, she wants to
Yeah.
help out. So she's going to intervene. This is where we get sort of that insight into that she's not waiting to collect all the information. She's going to act first,
Mhm.
which is kind of cool. I kind of like that. I want to see what she does. But before she can go on with this, sorry, did you have
Mm.
something you wanted to say?
I think like maybe it's just like her care. Well, it's
It
if
is,
the
yeah,
previous
absolutely.
chapters have shown is just like, oh, she likes to jump in head first
She does.
and
Yeah.
then make decisions there. Whereas
Yeah.
Rodian is more like, ooh, let's consume all this knowledge now before I say something. So he's not going to be moving anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, let's
Whereas
think and act.
yeah, whereas Hrathen has like does both at the same time. He's like, I have all
Yes.
these contingency plans. We're gonna start with A to B. Talking to the king doesn't work. Let's go right to B.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
as we'll see in the next
he's
chapter.
already on like a higher level in terms of
Hmm.
knowledge and the ability to act in power than Sarene and Raoden obviously are.
Mm.
So before she can continue on with this train of thought, the king interrupts her and is like, "What is a woman doing in my court?" Again, being a stand-up guy like he always is.
Wow,
"What is a
classy.
woman doing in my court? You're not supposed to come." She
Plays.
feigns idiocy or
Yeah.
whatever, like feigns innocence. Sorry,
Hmm.
saying that she was just there to look at a picture or whatever, and that she didn't know that she wasn't supposed to come. So she gets ceremonially, just sort of
Moved
booted out.
away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like, let's just get out of here.
Hmm.
And as she's leaving, is when she hears someone call her Na. It's like, wasn't expecting you for another day or whatever. And this turns out to be her uncle, which it's a nice little reunion that they have. Her
Hmm.
nickname for him is Hunky K, which I thought was really funny. But his actual name is Kyan,
A.
Uncle Kyan,
Yeah.
which is again the part of the group that Raoden is part of. Kyan
Mm.
and what was the other guy's name? Royal,
Royal, and then
Royal, and then
Luke.
Lucal
Luke.
is
Luke
just
is
his
his,
best friend. Doesn't
who's
mention
his
that he's a part of
Kane's
the group.
stepson.
It's Kane's
We'll
stepson, yeah,
we'll
which
see
we
in a bit
find out
here.
here soon.
Yeah. Spoilers.
So yeah, it's a nice little reunion. It's super pleasant.
Mm.
We learn that the prince, like he technically is a prince, the uncle, travels across the world. He's always going out on different journeys. He's a really big, like burly man. And as they're having their discussions, it's happening all very quickly. He's
Mm.
like, "Well, let me go introduce you to my wife." He also mentions like, "Probably shouldn't call me Hunky K anymore. You're not a kid." Oh, and the one thing that I liked about their reunion was as soon as she recognized who he was, she's like, "Where's my present?" Because whenever he would come back from his voyages,
He brings
that would
something
be the
back.
first thing
Yeah.
that she would always ask, which
That's
was
really
pretty
sweet, I guess.
adorable. It was super
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah, for sure. That was more sweet than I will admit, having as
Mm.
someone who doesn't have kids, I found the whole thing with Kyan's kids at the table, the daughter,
So
very
rude.
annoying.
Oh my
Oh
god.
my god, it was so annoying.
Ugh, more like spoiled princess, am I right?
Uh,
Or
well,
like or
no, she's actually that
duchess.
can't be a princess. Yeah, she's a baroness or whatever.
Baron, yeah.
Anyways, she goes
Deserving a little
to
knock on the head with the tray.
she goes to Kyan's house. The wife is very beautiful. Her name is Deora.
Yeah.
He lives in a huge like fortress mansion, so obviously he's been done well for himself. He has two small children, Casey, I'm gonna say Kaise,
And then
and
Jordan?
Daorn.
Aorn,
So the
yeah.
wife's name is Deora, the son's name is Daorn.
Mm.
We also meet Lucal, who is the stepson, who was, I guess, probably not still is, Raoden's best friend
Mm.
from another marriage, like the same mother, not. So yeah, Kyan's stepson, and he has a wife named Jala. So Jala and Lucal studied together at the Fjordish University. I think
Mhm.
that is one of the countries that is under the influence of the or under the dominion of the empire. Um,
Trying to remember, I
and
didn't write that empire name or kingdom
Fjorden.
name
Oh,
down.
it's Fjordish. Svordish, and they both studied at the
Oh,
university
yeah,
there.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this sort of leads to a conversation about Serene's marriage.
Mhm.
They, obviously console her, and this is when Kyan takes a minute to talk very highly of Raoden. Like he was
Mm.
a great man. So obviously he knew him well because we know because they were part of this group. Again, what this group was doing, we don't know. But we do know that, or we find out later on that Kyan was sent on a mission by his brother, Eventeo, Serene's father.
Yep.
And Sarene reflects back on when she asked her father, like, "Where's he going?" And he was like really sullen and just being like, "He's not going to be back for a while." She didn't make the connection when she was a kid, but she does make that connection now.
Hmm.
And before they have dinner, so first Serena is surprised because Kyan's cooking. We get a little bit insight into that later. Um, and before they go fetch dinner, they fetch one more kid. There are so many
Yeah.
kids in this. His name is
Happy
Adian.
family, except for like the anyway. Yes,
Yeah,
he. I want to say he has like maybe ADHD or something like that.
there's something.
Yeah, because
He's
he's like not talking to anybody, but he's
yeah,
like muttering an answer when someone asks like a rhetorical question.
but he knows
Uh,
like he's like a savant because like he knows
yes, that's the one. There we
they
go.
yeah, they talk about like he knows the number of steps in all of Sfjorden or to get across Sfjorden or
Hmm.
something like that. So yeah, there's something going on there for sure. So the next section, the last section of this chapter, lots of annoying conversations with kids. I'm not going to get into it. If there's anything that stood out to you, feel free to bring it up now or
Uh,
forever hold your peace.
well, not the kids, but we get a bit of a lore dump with the slaves and the
We do. Yes.
Elantrians.
So quickly
So
before we get into that,
okay,
one thing I want to mention, the food. They're eating food from the region called Jindo. There are
yes.
some weird utensils. I think one is like,
Maopan tongs, sticks.
yeah,
Yeah,
something like
which
that.
I'm assuming is like a different way of chopsticks. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, but they mentioned that like one end has like a shovel and the other one has like something else. I should have written
Shovel
it down, but I
should be
don't
like a
remember.
spoon. I get it's like I didn't really take that part in, but
I don't
to
know.
me,
I thought it was interesting. It was a nice little piece of world building.
but what's cool though is that Cayenne,
Cayenne. I'm calling him Cayenne.
Cayenne pepper. Uh, Cayenne, like when he goes traveling, brings back a recipe from his travels
Yes,
and
everywhere he
cooks
goes,
it
he seems
everywhere he
to
goes. Yeah, yeah,
yeah
yeah.
bring back a
And
recipe.
I find it hilarious that Sarene is like confused, but also like surprised that her hunk of a uncle is like this much of a homebody and likes cooking. And so they're like, so like at the table, she's just like, what? You could cook? And he's like, duh. Of
Yeah.
course I can.
Also, like he says that his mother or Serene's mother would never let him cook for the family because they had servants to do it.
Yeah, and he tried
Right.
to get cooking done in the royal kitchen, but the head chef was like, "Get out of my kitchen! It's not your place."
Exactly.
Exactly. And he's like, "Oh, but I told him I technically own the kitchen, but he said to get out or
That's
whatever."
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
a
That
bit of
was cool.
banter. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then Theodora says that or they found out that Certainly finds out that Theodora also cooks, and they like
Yes. She
alternate.
also. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
So they're a
and
very
then she's
modern family.
in a giant mansion, and then Certainly
Yeah.
says,
Giant fortress
"What?
mansion.
Butlers, no
Yeah.
servants?"
Yeah.
And
So
then lore dump.
exactly. Lore dump about the servants and more lore dump about the Raod. So we get
Mm,
some stuff about the Raod here. We also get some stuff about the Raod in Rothen's chapter next. So in this
yes.
chapter, and we also got some in the last chapter where we learned that it came with a storm and an earthquake.
Mm,
Anyway, so in this chapter we learned that when the Raod came, it was chaos, and the people who did the most damage, the people who did the uprising first, were the servants. They did the most killing. They killed the Elantrians. It doesn't look like they killed other,
only their masters, from
nobles.
what I'm told.
Yeah, they killed their
And I think it's more of like a
masters.
slave master slave relationship. I wouldn't say they're servants. I feel like there are more slaves at this point.
I mean, that's what Dilaf thinks they are.
Yeah.
So Kyan and Diora, they talk about how Kyan and Diora essentially watched it all happen. So
Hmm.
were they under threat, or was it literally just the slaves killing the Elantrians, and that was
And
it?
yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about because we're also like taking these characters' word for it, so the timeline of when these happen could be different or altered, I guess. So like,
Yep.
did the slaves attack the Elantrians first before the Shayad went kind of miffed or whatever? Right?
Hmm.
Maybe that brings a different, eye to the fact that the slaves get a different power the Shayad they could use against their masters, or did they find a different magical way of disrupting the Shayad so they can attack their masters?
Right. Yeah, that's a
So
very good
that's interesting.
question.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The more you know.
Yep.
Or I mean, the more that you think about.
Yep. So the end of this is more conversations with the kids. I think the
Skip,
girl's
skip.
name is Kaisi or something. She wants to be a princess, but she can't.
That's what okay, I remember one thing, and I'll forever hold my breath about this kid. She tells Sarene she's too tall to be a princess because
Yeah.
she read in a book, oh, princesses are petite. And
Yeah.
then at the end, when it's I don't, what was it? Oh, I don't know. Oh yeah, Ash shows up.
Yes, and she's like
Yes,
amazed by Ash.
yeah, and she's
Yeah,
like, "Oh, can I play with Ash?" And Serene's like, "I don't know. You called me too tall, so nuh-uh."
yeah,
Yeah, so I'm
yeah.
like,
That was.
"Haha, just desserts. There you go, just served."
And at the end, this is where Sarene also notices or sort of notes that this is the first time while she's been in K that she's been sort of relieved of her tension. So that familial
Mm,
connection, being able to just sit around a table, have a meal, that is something that's really therapeutic almost for
mm.
her. So that's really nice. She kind of ends this chapter in a good place.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did Serene mention her uncle was here in her chapter previously, the previous one?
I
Like
don't
chapter 2?
think
Yeah.
so.
So, like,
No,
was she surprised to
she
see
was
here?
because
Yeah.
okay, so yes, now I'm remembering. So she when it comes out
Mm,
that she realizes her uncle was sent on a mission and not just on one of his travels was when she talks to Kyan and she says, "Oh, my father thinks that you just went out on one of your voyages and settled on an island." And then Kyan's like, I know you couldn't make the connection when you were a kid, but you should make that connection now. And that's when we get that quick flashback that she
okay.
sent him on a mission. So this entire time she thought that Kyan was just off gallivanting and doing his own thing, living his best life as a sailor.
Mm.
Yeah,
Because he's not the first in line of the throne, so second
exactly.
son
So he's
does
gonna go
whatever he
do his
got.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Classic. Can't do
So
that.
the last chapter is a little bit shorter. This is the Rothen chapter. So
Ooh.
Rothen, it's a lot of essentially just Rothen and Dilaf talking
Mhm.
and Dilaf giving him information. Well, they're exchanging information. Rothen is talking about how he's going to dismantle the empire, and Dilaf is giving us backstory
Mm,
to get his perspective on the events that happened. So they start talking about how the king is lost to them. Obviously, they're going to have to do something different, um, and he wants to avoid a lot of bloodshed. He reflects on the rebellion that happened in Duladel, which is where Galadon is from,
mhm,
and how much bloodshed there was there, and he wants to avoid that this time around. He does mention that he saw Sarene in the throne room, and this is
mhm,
when Dilaf is able to identify her as the princess. And he gives again the backstory as to what happened with Raoden and how the marriages work, these contracts work
mm,
in Erelone. And Dilaf also really doesn't like Teod. And this is because they're the home of the Shu Korath, which is considered a degenerate sect of the Shu Kesig. So this again, the Shu Kesig is the overarching one. The
mhm.
Shu Korath is what Iadon follows and what the Dorethis consider a degenerate one. And in the same level, the same parallel under Shu Kesig is the Shu Dareth, which is what the priests of the Fjordell Empire are.
Or the Fjord
S-
Empire as a whole.
yes.
Yeah.
So Rothen, again, showing his intelligence, recognizes now the treaty that's in place because of this marriage and how much harder it will be to sort of take over. And this is when I think he decides, I mean, maybe he decided this earlier, but this is when he reveals that, okay, I'm going to show you how to dismantle an empire.
I think
Take
he's
me.
done it before.
He probably, yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Or one of his
he
other colleagues has done it. I don't know.
yeah, or he's read about it at least.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, because the Empire has definitely done it. So he asks Dilaf to take him to the Wall of Elantris.
Hmm.
So they're standing above the Wall of Elantris. So when we first met Rothen, he sort of remarked about how the city of Kae is not very defensible. Like if
Mm.
the Fjorden Empire was to invade, this is what we would do. We could destroy these buildings, and then if the people try to retreat into Elantris, we'll just sort of what's the siege, right, where you just cut off all the supply lines,
Yeah,
let them
yeah.
all
I
rot
don't
in
know the
there
name, but yeah, like
until
keep
they give
them
up.
pinned
Yeah,
exactly until they
yeah,
run out of resources.
exactly. But while he's standing up on the wall, he realizes that his initial sort of interpretation of this was too light. Like it's actually way more, yeah, indefensible. What's the
Well, there's no battlements on the wall because it's
yeah?
built to
The
contain
defenses are
Elantris.
worse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's just like a promenade on the top, so you can like
Exactly. And he also
walk
he's like
around.
when he this I think this might be the first time that he's seen Elantris, at least since the Raod happened,
Mm,
and he realizes like they'd be going to their death if they went into Elantris. They're not going to retreat into Elantris. Like this is not going to work for them.
yeah.
Yep. We also learn a little bit about why Elantris or why Kae hasn't been sort of invaded by any others like pirates or brigands or whatever.
Two reasons,
Apparently,
I think.
two reasons.
Yeah.
One, superstition. No
Hmm.
one wants to get affected by the Raod. And the other one is that Kae's nobles are apparently paying some of the leaders of these bands of invaders just to stay away from the city. Both of these things, Hrathen notes are very tenuous. Like
Mm.
it's very like it's on a scale and it could very easily tip over.
And he also
Um,
remarks that the larger groups are employed by the Fjordan Empire.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And they won't attack unless they're told to, which right now they're
Yes.
not.
Which is probably more the reason why they haven't attacked, not just the nobles bribing them. Like
Yeah.
the nobles are probably just taking or the leaders of the invading groups are probably just like taking the money. Just being like, yeah,
Putting on
sure, we won't attack you,
yeah,
but
ha
we're not
ha
going
ha.
to attack you anyways.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Dilaf really hates the Elantrians.
Mhm.
Um,
He gives like a
and
very like superstitious religious response.
yes, he
Um,
does after. So after they leave the
yeah.
wall, he does. But he's like tense the whole time they're up there, and
Mm.
just like really kind of struggling. And Rothan does see an Elantrin for the first time, and I think they lock eyes a little bit, but he doesn't like see anything behind the eyes. It's like a wild, almost feral creature. I think it's crawling on all fours too, and it just like looks
It's like
around like an animal and takes off.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like not exactly, but it's like it looks like it's gonna fall over anytime. So its arms are like outstretched.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it looks like it's like grasping around for food or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. So at the end of the first section, Rothan said, "I'll teach you how to take down an empire."
Hmm.
At the end of this section, he gives us his first step, and that is finding someone to hate, something to coalesce around to hate, and that's going to be the Elantrians. So back at the what is it called? The cathedral. I think there's a actual lore name for this, but I can't remember.
I thought
Excuse
they
me.
named it like a church. Don't they say church?
They do say something. I think they do say something. Yes, but
Should I just
I
pull
don't
up the
know
book?
if you can find it. Yeah, that'd be great. I don't know if there's like an actual like
It's a-
aeonic name for it.
Hmm.
Anyways, while you're looking for that, I'm just going to keep going.
Yep.
So Rothan asks Dilaf a bit about what happened before and during the Riad. Dilaf believes that
It's a chapel, by the way.
a chapel. There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice. Okay. Dilaf believes that all of Erelon's people were slaves to the Elantrians because he's like, was the city as Rothan was saying, was the city as pristine as they all say it was? And Dilaf is like, yeah, the slaves kept it clean. And he's like, slaves? It's like all of the people of Erelon were slaves to the Elantrians. He
Mm.
also believes that the Elantrians were charlatans, that they lied, that their powers weren't real, and that they made promises that they couldn't keep.
Yep.
They promised like eternity and all this kind of stuff, but they couldn't even deliver eternal lives to themselves, right? The Rayout happened and everything collapsed. And Rothan notes like, so you hate them because they disappointed you, which was, I thought, an interesting line. And I feel like there might be more there, but they don't really, from what I've got in my notes, I don't think they dove into it too much more.
No, it more like I think Hrathen like points into question Dilop's own dislike
Yeah,
for Elantris, and so
yeah,
when it like when it's conveyed to Hrathen, it's like, oh, you just hate them because they didn't promise you anything because you're disappointed, and so
hmm
that it like to me when I read that, it sounded like Hrathen was just like he himself is disappointed Dilop that he like chose something so petty to dislike the Elantrians.
right. Yes,
So
yeah,
I was like,
because they
yeah,
do
okay.
have that relationship, right? They have that master apprentice relationship, so
Hmm.
that does make sense, absolutely. So this is when Rothan starts talking a little bit about supernatural powers that aren't given by Jadith, the god of this Shu Kessig religion.
Hmm.
So the Elantrians, it's believed, I guess, that they were given powers by God, by this Jadith. But there are supernatural powers that exist outside of those given by him. And this is when we hear the name Svarkis,
Yeah.
Svarkiss. So I don't completely understand how this works yet, but it's described that the Svarkis are the souls of dead men who hated Jadith. I don't understand how this would give them power.
I
And I don't
think
think it's explained, but let me know if you what you got out of it.
the reason why Hrathen brought it up in the first place, so they use it as the scapegoat. So
Yes.
to me, it sounds like it's more like the boogeyman
Right.
of the devil, I guess, in this case,
Yes.
or
That
something
is
like that,
exactly what it is.
where
Absolutely.
essentially what they describe it, or what Hrathen tells Dilaf, is that these evil or dark souls will then corrupt an Elantrian, and they'll give them this the powers that they display, but then in the end would like do like an evil trick on them, where like, haha, your time's up type of deal, like a monkey's paw or something
Right.
like that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I think I don't know if this is what Hrathen believes, but I think he's going to tell this as a story to get everybody to rally up and be like, oh, Elantrians are evil. So
That's definitely it. Yeah.
yeah.
And as he's explaining this to Dilaf, Dilaf comes to the realization, like, oh, like they were the Svarkis or whatever it is. And there's
Mm.
a quick little section that I thought was important where Jadith kind of notes he doesn't say it out
Jadith?
loud, or sorry, Jadith.
Hrathen.
Rothan notes, he doesn't say it out loud, but he notes in his mind that maybe this isn't the most logically sound argument, but he decides not, like he specifically decides not to say anything about it.
Yeah,
And
I
it's specifically
also
when Deloff makes the connection. So he
yeah, let me
knows that it's not going to work exactly as, like it's not the most airtight thing, but he's going to use it anyways. And I think he also knows that Deloff knows that Rothan doesn't 100% believe this sort of story that he's going to use, but at the end of this
mm,
chapter, that is the story that he is going to use to unify the people against the Elantrians. And he does note that hate is quicker to unify people than devotion.
mm. I have the passage here if you want. I
Sure.
think that's what you mean. Um, I'll just read from the bit of
Yeah,
the top.
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
You think Elantrians are Svrakis? Dilaf asked. It is accepted doctrine that the Svrakis can control the bodies of the evil, Hrathen said, buckling his greaves. Is it hard to believe that all this time they've been in controlling bodies of Elantrians, making them appear as gods to the fools, simple-minded and unspiritual? There was a light in Dilaf's eyes. The
Yeah.
concept was not new to the Arteth, Hrathen realized. Suddenly, his flash of inspiration didn't seem quite so brilliant.
Yeah.
So I think in that aspect, it's just like, oh, they've thought about it before. So I
Yeah.
don't know if it's like something new. But then the next part is like, Dilaf questions that to him. He's like,
Yeah.
Dilaf regarded Hrathen for a moment, then spoke. You don't really believe it, do you? He asked, his voice uncomfortably accusatory for one speaking to his Raoden. So like it's just like a student, like, Professor, you're sure
Yeah.
that's the right equation?
Are you
So
bullshitting me?
are you bullshit? Pretty much. And yeah, Hrathen literally just says, or the next line's like, Hrathen was careful not to let his discomfort show. It doesn't matter, Arteth. The connection is logical. People will follow it. So
So
he's relying on the simple mindedness of not like the person, but the people.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, and him realizing that they made that connection so quickly, maybe it's alluding to that it's not going to be as easy as he thinks.
Hmm. And
Because like
people are going to question it.
exactly.
It's like, do you think that's like a boogeyman is going to take over the Elantrians? Come
Yeah,
on, what is this?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the end of the last chapter, or the
Hmm.
last chapter that we read, chapter 6.
Oh, we're done the book. Let's keep going.
On to the next one.
Let's see how much did we read. Let's show it to the camera. Oh, that's
Yeah.
what, an
What,
eighth? That's not a
what's
lot.
how many pages?
Oh
That
man,
is
74.
74 pages of a, what is this? A 600, 500 and 600 and something page book. Yeah, 615
Mm.
or so.
So listeners, for homework, divide that.
Yeah.
Then that's how long you should stick around.
Yeah, we might have to pick up the pace a little bit.
Yeah. Do we
Uh,
want to? Well, then that's my question for you: is do you want to crank it up to 7 chapters or
7?
5? Well, yeah. Do we? Okay. Well, I wonder
You
if
know,
I
yeah,
wonder if we take this
that's,
offline or not.
I
But
mean, whatever. You get a little bit of
listeners,
behind the scenes
there
information
you
here.
go.
So, excuse me.
You're welcome.
There's a
I
couple
mean,
things to think about when we want to increase the chapter count. I
mhm.
think if we were to increase it drastically, that means that the granularity that we get in when we're going into the details of the chapter will probably
Mm.
be lost a bit, which I'm totally fine with. Or we hit some sort of middle ground. But I think maybe we can go offline and sort of do some calculations to see how long it would take us, because ideally I don't think a book like this should take us 6 months to get through.
No,
I
that's
would hope something like Stormlight Archive, that could probably take 6 months, because that's a like a 1200 1400 page book
yeah,
sometimes.
but that's when you're reading it on your own, not in this format of reading chapter by chapter. That's gonna
Right.
take even longer.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm on the one side of the field where like you read more chapters, but you get like the gist of what's happening.
Hmm.
And maybe we point out some like, oh, interesting tidbits in this chapter that I really like that's pointed out or
Yeah.
whatever. We do that. But and maybe this is just us figuring out what our podcast vibe is. Is
Yeah,
it,
for
do we
sure. I
want
mean,
granularity? Do you want that extra detail of, page by page, like understanding of what's happening? I think that's for Mike and I to like figure out exactly
yeah.
what that looks like. So, second, oh geez, third episode of
Fourth? This is the
uh,
third episode. Yeah, this
this
is the
is the
third episode.
third.
Shows how much we know.
Episode 0 and then 1, 2. Classic computer science indexing. There you
That's right.
go. The true way of counting.
Yep. So yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll come up with anything. If anyone who's watching this on YouTube has any suggestions, please feel
Hmm.
free to leave some comments. Maybe one day we'll have an email address. Maybe one day we'll link our Discord, and then you guys
What?
can let us know all that stuff. It's all
What?
coming. But for right
What?
now, we're just figuring it out. It's like, the first season, when you watch the first season of a TV show,
Uh-huh. It's
the
a little
first season of The
janky.
Office, it took them a little while to figure out their
Yeah.
groove, right? Same with a lot of
Mm.
these shows. We're just
You're putting a
figuring it
lot of
out right now.
pressure. Oh, the Office did really get good though.
Yeah, we're not making that kind of promise.
uh,
We're just going to keep
I
doing what
hope
we're
not.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
We
Yeah.
just like to talk about books, okay? So yeah,
That's why you're here, dear
un-
listener and viewer.
it is what's the word? Undetermined how many chapters we're going to read next time. We'll figure
X
that out
amount.
offline. And when you see the title of the next episode, you'll be like, oh shit, they read this many chapters. Then you might need to know if you need to catch up or whatever. But it'll probably be more than 3, because we're going to need to pick up the pace if we want to get through this. I am eager personally to get to Mistborn. I think you're really, really going to like it. It's
Okay.
definitely one of my favorite series.
All right.
And we need to finish Elantris, and we need to finish a Elantris short story after this.
Whoa, really?
I don't think it's very long, and
Okay.
then we can start Mistborn, and then I think it's like the 3 Mistborn books back to back, which is going to be great.
Damn. Okay.
So yeah,
Well,
exciting stuff.
I'm not in a rush to finish Elantris. Like so far, I'm
No,
enjoying it.
I'm enjoying it too. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really liking it. So yeah, we got to find that balance. Savoring it a bit, like a good steak, but also not
You
doing
mean
too
like a
much at once.
nice glass of whiskey, a nice
Yeah,
scotch?
yeah, that too.
Okay,
Anything nice that you enjoy.
whatever grills your steak, or if you're not enjoyer of meats, whatever nice, gentle pastime that you enjoy and take bit by bit. Do
There you
that.
go.
That's
Yeah,
what this
exactly.
podcast is. I hope
That's what we're trying to figure out.
that's it. We're getting
All
there.
right. Yeah, we're rambling now. So that was chapters 3 to 6 of Elantris, or 4 to 6 of Elantris. We will pick it up again next week with some more,
Oof.
and hope to see you guys there.
Damn,
All right.
that's another one for the books.
Oh my God. Bye, everybody.
See ya.